So numbers for test or anything else I want you to remember when we're dealing with any sort of wood structure and any sort of wall cladding that goes on top of that wood structure other than brick, we're going to be looking at 8 inches. That should be the number you want to remember. 6 inches is going to be if it's a brick veneer building. Now, the only time that I would be very anal retentive or aggressive with that 8 inches is when I'm dealing with exterior insulation finish systems or Drive It or Synergy products, right? With those, because they're very litigious and it's just problematic. They got very specific rules, and even though this is a specific rule too, I found that you could be lenient when it comes to wood, vinyl, aluminum, and stuff like that, not following these rules, and it doesn't really affect the house so much. Eaves, it affects the house, all right. And when it does affect the house, it's going to be drastic. When the snow and stuff gets in there. So we want to make sure that we have our minimums, especially with eaves. If you want to go ahead and call out the 8 inches, that's your call. Me personally, our choice. This is something that we will risk or accept a little bit of risk with it, and we kind of stick to the 1 to 3 inch rule. We both mostly want to see it. If it's covering or it's a very small amount that's exposed, then we're going to document it, but otherwise we kind of leave it be for a bit and we ignore it. All right. So regardless of the wall cladding, we definitely don't want to have the grading above the foundation line. I think that's common sense. Once we start trapping water, not to mention, the insects, the termites, the mice, we're giving everybody clear, free access coming in here. Now, this one's going to actually be a common one that you're going to run into. And I don't go, too much off the beaten path on this one. It's a legitimate problem when we start thinking about it. There's supposed to be a gap between the brick and the wood structure underneath there. At the bottom of that, we're supposed to have weep holes so we can let that condensation or water escape from there. So what we ended up doing was putting the brick facade on first. And again, this is a brick veneer. And then afterwards, we poured our front porch in this case, because I know that there was a roof over this one. Now, every house in the subdivision was built this way. This was basically their design plan and how they did it. A good solution, I really don't have. All right. But just because there's no solution doesn't mean I want to bring this and make it my problem. So what I like to do is just kind of make the same explanation now, what should be there, let my clients know about it, go on the inside, get very aggressive with it, look for any signs of moisture, condensation. Even though we don't have to move any of the insulation, I actually like to do that. And again, I'm looking for water that got past the structure and started coming to the inside of the house, or anything that could rot out that floor joist or rim joist that's behind there. If I see it, that makes my life a lot easier. If I don't see it, I'm going to tell my client, I don't know what to suggest. I can't justify removing this front porch and lowering it down to below the concrete so we can let those weep wicks, release the water. If there's no water that's causing a problem, not every property was going to create condensation, and different people living in different homes in different situations are also going to create different condensation issues. For example, if somebody likes it hotter with a lot of humidity, as opposed to somebody who likes it cooler and drier inside their house, those two people are going to get different humidity levels or condensation levels when the hot meets the cold. It's just what it's going to be. And there's no way we could tell how our families are going to be living when they move in there. So something could change. So definitely bring it to their attention. But yeah, I don't know. If they want my honest opinion, I don't think I could recommend somebody, tear that stoop out and go for a repair. But they should know what they're getting and the risk that they're going to be taking. So I also don't want to be the bad guy in case condensation does start coming in or things start to rot. I want to make sure that they were warmed, plain and simple. So we mentioned earlier about the lack of the mounting blocks. Here on this side, you can see they got the spigot drilled straight in there. Pieces are buckled, come loose, fell to the ground. These are going to be some of the common defects that we're going to run into. Wood siding, same type of stuff, the loose, rotted, peeling paint and so forth. We're going to hit those again in a little bit. I would like you to be able to describe the different siding materials that would come in there. So planks is what they're showing on the left. Board and batten is what we're showing on the right. Let's see what else we got here. Here they're talking about the corners and the different ways to finish the corners. I think there's 3 slides here, and I'm gonna go through all 3, and then we could come back to this one. So here they're talking about mitering. Here they're putting corner posts up in there, and then the metal brackets. All right. These metal brackets, I'm not a big fan of them whatsoever. They tend, this is just the history that I've seen. The water gets into those brackets and it's actually held there, and we don't let it drain out, and because of which that soaks into the wood for a longer period of time and causes things to rust out much quicker. Mitering the joints, as we see here, I'm good with this. As long as they paint the ends or put caulk on the ends and then paint the ends, then I'm fine with that. We want to make sure those are tight, and then even caulk or put sealant on the, not just before we put them on there, but even after we put them on there, we seal up that joint as well. This way, if any water does get into it, it's not going to be soaked into the wood, and it's going to keep draining. Takes a lot of work. Some people actually don't like this style or the way this looks, so it doesn't happen often, plain and simple. Now this drawing is showing the boards on top of the siding, so it is drawn incorrectly. Those vertical boards, those corner posts like that, they're actually going to be straight onto the air barrier, all right? And some of them overlap, and they actually manufacture, especially if you go with the vinyl ones, pieces that already have that 90-degree angle. And then what you end up doing is you butt the siding right up next to it. There is no flashing behind the siding where it butts, but we do end up sealing or caulking that area. All right. And this is the same thing on an inside turn. I think I got actual pictures of it. Good. So here we're showing the pieces they put on the corners, and we butt the siding right into it. When you're dealing with wood, hardy board, this is a common installation, and people have very good luck with this. All right, I don't see many issues that come into play with it, so I kind of like it. Wood rot. This is a test question, and at least one that I became aware of, and it's also in the real world. So biggest problems or complaints you're ever going to get are going to be wood penetrating the home. All right, so wood rot, water damage, that would count towards that. We are expected to probe wood rot to see the extent and how bad it is. However, there's also a comment in the SOPs that says we're not allowed to damage the property whatsoever. All right, so the real question comes into play when you find painted wood, and how much probing should we be doing to this painted wood. All right, so the bare parts, that I'm seeing, so I'm looking up in this area here, I think you're fine to probe that, see how bad it is. I mean, in all reality, you're probably thinking, come on, Charlie, this is bad. How much badder, and yes, I did use that word incorrectly, but what am I expecting to find? I mean, this is so bad right now that it's the boards are coming loose and they're falling off. I mean, this isn't something we should try to save and protect. We should be replacing this piece and putting on a fresh new piece at this point in time. All right. This one right here, you can actually see the darkened wood underneath it. It is wet. The paint is bubbling because it can't stick to it. So water is getting behind the trim and the window area. It has caused it to rot out pretty bad. And, this one of our guys tried to probe it. And all of a sudden the big chunk came off. And, when stuff like this happens, it becomes noticeable. And, we kept thinking, for what purpose? If we know that it's rotted already, and we know that something is not flashed right, water's getting in there, I'd rather be aggressive on the inside than the outside here. I think our job is done. We identified a big issue. There's no reason to create some cosmetic damage. If I was the owner of this home and I came around here and maybe I was naive to the extent of the rot or wood rot damage on there, and then all of a sudden some home inspector came here, and I'm going to start thinking, what did he do? Did he stab this thing or hit it with a hammer and broke it off? Why would you do that to my house? And I think I'd be pretty upset about it. So again, same thing. You find the rotted wood, don't go too crazy. Just document it, take a picture of it. Your job is pretty much done. Let somebody else go ahead and get it repaired. So you are going to find the wood rot, all right? Now, when it's the parts that could trick you is when the wood looks like it's in really good shape. And sometimes people can sand it and make it smooth and paint it. And yeah, you will be deceived. It does happen, But, just another clue. It doesn't always work, but putting that thermal imager sometimes, these areas of repairs do point out, or if there's an area where there's a draft, that's going to show heat coming from the house. And those also do, point out or jump out at you. So they're talking about plank siding again. And what we want to do is stagger the seams. We try to get the seams on a stud. So the drawing on the left-hand side, you can see everything was staggered. They're on studs. That's all good. Here on the right-hand side, they lined a whole bunch of them up. Because they're overlapping each other and we get, 2 or 3 of them on top of each other, we're just making one big area where it can go underneath. And same thing whenever unless I got a solid plywood underneath, we don't always have that. The strength of the siding is going to be the wood siding. They probably will have Celtex or some sort of styrofoam underneath there. So we want to get our seams on the wall studs themselves. Now, how are we going to be able to tell that? I don't know. That's not always the case from the outside. All right. Most of our nails are going to be hidden. This is something I'll be honest, I don't check for. If I see it, see a gap underneath there, I'm not going to complain about it. The bottom line is using the round-headed nails on the top of these things leaves a gap in there. This way, if any water does get trapped into it, that airflow allows things to evaporate, or allows water to evaporate and dry everything out. The faster we can dry the siding, the longer it's going to last, plain and simple. Now, cedar is probably one of the more common wood siding materials. Hardy board, LP Smart Side, those are either cement. Hardy board is more of a cement type board, where LP Smart Side has glues and resins and waterproofing wax that prevents water from being absorbed into them. So both of those materials, they actually sell them where they sit in water for years and they don't get damaged. That's part of their marketing. But with cedar, you can't do that. Even though cedar is naturally resistant to rot, cedar will rot. All right, it may not be as quick as standard pine, but it will rot. So we do want to get it dried up as much as possible. On the roofing section, we talked about the difference between wood shakes and wood shingles. Typically for siding, you're going to find most people are going to go with a shingle instead of a shake. So in review, shakes are thicker. They're usually split. They're usually different widths, where shingles are cut, manufactured. They're usually going to be smooth and usually going to be equal widths. There could be some variances. So here we have different widths, but these are still shingles that we're looking at. You can see the bottom of each one of these lines, how straight and smooth these are. You know, where the shakes are going to be rough, ragged edges, just because of the split of the wood. I'm going to go over this quick. Most of it was explained in the roofing installation. Siding installation is still the same. All right. So as we go all the way across looking at our seams, we want to make sure that we do not have seams lining up, you know, every 2 or 3 rows. The purpose of that is if right now the only one that's protecting this seam and this seam is this middle board right here. If that middle board cracks or splits right there, now I'm going to have a clear opening straight through. 1/3 is exposed to the weather. We do want to have a 1/4 to 3/8 gap. That's when it's dry. When it gets wet, it's going to swell up. So sometimes there won't be any gap. If we don't have a gap when it's dry, then when it swells up, it's going to want to buckle and damage everything else. Nails shouldn't be exposed. That's the bottom line. And after everything's already installed, we may not be able to see any of the other stuff that comes in there. All right. Other types of siding and wall cladding that we're going to run into. Let's go back. I think they were talking about inner seal. And I know LP, Smart Side, back in the 70s, they also had a class action lawsuit on them. Yeah, that material was basically a pressboard material, and water was able to get into it, and it caused it to expand, and then it would rot and fall apart real quick. They changed the name. I don't think the other stuff was called Smart Side, but they kept the process because their process was good. The only problem with it is when water got into it, it damaged it. So what they did was they added wax to it, and I got to say I'm actually really impressed with their product. I even put it on my house. It's about 20% less than hardy board, and it has the same lifespan, plus it's lighter, easier to work with. You're going to find it on a lot of high-end houses. Everybody's sold on hardy board, that's cement fiber type material, and it's good. Don't get me wrong. There's absolutely no. I really like it as long as it's installed properly, but that's with every siding, as long as it's installed properly. But you're going to find on the trims that everybody is using the LP Smart Side. You know, again, it's easier to work with, easier to cut, and you know, it's lighter weight, cheaper, and it has the same lifespan as the actual hardy board. So that part I'm pretty decent with. So well over 100 different types of siding in the past 50 years. Okay, some of it's made to look like horizontal lap siding. We're getting into the composition wood siding and the different patterns that come with it. T111 are 4x8 sheets of board. You'll see them in straight panels, board and band, and cedar shingles or other wood-like surfaces. Again, it's 4 foot by 8. Comes in about a 1/2 inch thicknesses. Sometimes they're 10 foot. And basically it's a sheet of paneling. Stucco, wood grain. And there's been a lot of problems with this stuff. So I've had a couple of townhome properties where they had nothing but sheet goods on there, and they did not want to, you know, when you're dealing with large townhome complexes or condo they're sheet goods, they're paneling siding, all right, they're T111s or whatever, and water has been getting into it, causing it because it was a composite wood material, and pretty much all plywood is either oriented strand boards or straight up sheets of plies of wood that comes in there, or some sort of a composition of sawdust type material that they glue and press together to make the patterns. And if water gets to it, it's going to damage it. But like I said, they're changing that mixture now and putting the wax resin in it, so everything's better. So the goal is to keep these things dry. And the apartment complexes that I've been finding where they've been pretty successful and extending the lifespan of the wood siding is they actually paint all the siding before they put it on. They paint the front, they paint the back, and then they paint the outside edges as well. If they have to cut anything, those areas get painted as well. The whole idea is those exposures are typically going to be the spots where water wants to enter. So painting them I thought was a great idea. So when water comes down here, we want to, our wall siding is designed to shed that water and keeping it going down. Sometimes I have to stack my sheet goods one on top of another. When that happens, I'm going to have a horizontal line in here. That horizontal line is going to allow water to get behind there and want to damage either the back of the sheet good or the top or the bottom of the one above it. So they have something called Z flashing. It's basically the same as head flashing, and that goes in between the sheet goods so that any water that does run down the top one won't go behind the one below it. It's going to keep being forced out of the bottom. However, these are pinched in there. There's usually not much of a gap, and there should be, about maybe a quarter of an inch, half-inch gap underneath these. But a lot of people will just rest them on there and then nail them in place. And when that happens and water gets trapped underneath there, it's just a matter of time, and it's going to soak up onto it, and you'll find water damage there. Tongue and groove, or like a shiplap type of horizontal, another good way to keep the water out and so it doesn't go back up and get inside. We don't find too many tongue and grooves with the sheet goods, at least not on the vertical planks. Yeah, we don't find too much of that at all. I've seen these little spacers, or I don't know, battens I guess they're called, or fillers that kind of stuff in there. I see a lot on like hardy boards or other type of composite. This is just a personal opinion. I just don't think it looks good at all. I'd rather see somebody paint that edge, and then what's very common as well is they'll put a piece of flashing behind that joint so that it's not noticeable, and then they'll leave a little gap there to let the water drain out and also give it room to expand and contract if needed. Right.